The Player Development Conference is 2 weeks away. Yes, 2 weeks away. I am so ecstatic. I can't wait. And today I'm going to give you a review of a panel we had last year at the 2023 Player Development Conference, the first one, where we had 5 of our great professionals talk about player development programming. We had Kevin Washington, JP Abercrombie, Darian Harris, Tobruk Blaine, and Ashley Goodman. But before we get to that, I want to talk to you about the tickets. So, tickets you could purchase in the show notes. What you will get with the ticket, you will get access to the sessions, of course. You will get opportunities to hear these speakers talk about a topic they are going to talk about or want to talk about. So last year we did panels. This year we're doing a singular session. So you're going to hear people talk. Hey, you may hear yours truly take a session and talk about interview prep. We'll see. We'll see. But you're going to hear whoever's leading that session talk about something close to them. The topics are incredible. When I do the 1 week video next week, I will read all that out to you and you will get to hear it. Now, what you also will get to with this ticket, is you will get access to the recording. So yes, 2 days, 3 days, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. It's going to be a lot of different times. We're doing morning, afternoon, evening. And so you want to get access to those recordings. And so we have that for you all as well. And I am so excited to announce something at the conference. So I want to see you there. You need to be there. Player development. I'm so excited for our speakers. I'm so excited for this platform. Thank you all for the support that you've given. Once again, get your tickets in the show notes. It's going to be a great time. You do not want to miss it. We are 2 weeks out. Also, while you're here, check the show notes. Subscribe to the Player Development newsletter. I'm giving a lot of game in that newsletter that I want you to have so you can be successful in helping create impact in the lives of athletes. Now, let's get to this panel from last year. You'll hear a certain amount of it. And after that, I want you to go purchase your tickets. Can't wait to see you in 2 weeks. Let's go. Here's the Player Development Programming panel from the 2023 Player Development Conference. Awesome. Awesome. Thank you. So we'll combine. Now we're going to the programming. Here we go. Here we go. Hey, thank y'all for sharing all that. And you all, hope you're taking notes. You may be someone who's a student. You may be someone that's in another career you're interested. What they all said is the experiences you have right now will help you when you get enrolled. All right. So combining 2 questions. We'll start with Darian. We'll go Darian, TB, JP, Ash, and Kev. All right. So how do you plan programming out for the calendar year? And when you do plan this out, who do you meet with? So how do you plan it out and who do you meet with? Darian, we'll start with you.
Yeah, awesome question. So up until this year, it was really just meeting with myself, honestly. And the way that I planned it out was really based on the football calendar. So if you're working with a specific team, you're at the mercy of the calendar of the student athletes and the sport.
Okay.
I'm fortunate enough to be at a place where our head coach puts a lot of stock emphasis and focus on player development and off the field programming, but at the same time we still have to go win football games. So you're not going to get at the times that you may want. You have to fit things in the time that's available to you. So everything is based on the football calendar, from returning to campus in January, to starting workouts in February, to spring ball from March through April, to end of semester in May, to the break they have throughout May, to coming back in June and July with summer. And then once you hit August, it's football season, and that's that. You're not having anything in the season. So up until, again, this year, it was really just myself, an army of one, and then some support from some other staff members. But this year, with the addition of Ashton Henderson, who some of you all may be familiar with in the athletic department, is now our Deputy AD of Championship Resources, and also in conjunction with Caleb Thornhill, who some of you all may also know. He recently left the Miami Dolphins to start his own company. We now have kind of created a unit where we can build programming together, which has been a huge help for not just myself in football, but for the rest of the athletic department. Because again, I'm sure as folks know, usually if football, maybe men's basketball, in some other places it's different, but I know at Michigan State, there's no other sport that has a player development role specific to them. So it's really difficult to get the other student athletes to participate in these types of programming. But now that we have more support, and as well as our career services department hired 2 more full-time, we now can incorporate other student athletes into programming, which it's been awesome. It's been very impactful for them, and something I hope that we continue.
Awesome. Thank you. TB, same question.
I basically could just say that's my answer, to be honest. One thing that I'll just follow up with is, I think people who work, technically I work in student athlete development, not player development, but I started in player development. And because your roster is so massive with football, and the value that an institution puts on a head football coach, I would say student athlete development, player development, starting in football is a really great way to start. I still do that now. Technically, I'm still doing player development for football and then also trying to do it for everybody else. And the biggest thing is that if you can align your programming around the football schedule and you can get your coaching staff on football to get your athletes there, a lot of the trickle down effect will occur with all the other sports. That's how I've had my success. So I work in heavy partnership with our DFO and chief of staff, which a side note, the chief of staff is also my husband. So that's kind of interesting, but saying all of that, I do want to just emphasize how valuable the time is. And so even though your intentions might be really good and you have this really incredible idea and you've got to be able to realize that it might not always come to fruition the way you intended it to be. So be flexible as you go through programming. That would be my biggest piece of advice.
Awesome. Thank you. JP.
I'm going to make an amendment to what TB said first and foremost, because she said she's trying to do this. She's doing it. She's thriving. She's doing it well. So I just want to make sure you give the flowers because I'm not taking that. So as part of my answer, I think what's really important for this group to know is that everyone has something to teach you, but you have to be willing to learn. I'll say that one again. Everyone has something to teach you. You have to be willing to learn. So in the space of who do I meet with, it's being present. Every single person that's a part of our department, our program has something that can tell me how a student athlete is interacting with others, needs to interact with others, how our staff is working together. And those are things that I can use in trying to assess what programming is needed, how we do that programming, all of that fun stuff. So how do I plan? I may come up with a shell or a skeleton in the summer, but there are tweaks that are made along the way. For me, for the framework that we have at our department and our current structure, I can be the architect of this awareness calendar or campaign calendar, if you will, to say, here are some of the things that are happening on the academic side, on the campus side, on the industry side at specific times of year, and make sure that our staff is aware of that. It's Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month. A lot of people know that Coach Marcus Freeman is Black. He's also Asian. So when we think about how we do programming or the conversations we have, I can set those themes and give people space to be great in their own right. It's also Mental Health Awareness Month. So thinking about what that programming looks like, just being able to say, hey, everybody, here's the big umbrella I need you to activate in, and then giving them the tools, the spaces to be creative. So again, I get to be that architect. I get to have those conversations, but every day is an opportunity to learn what our department can do better, what our students need, what our staff need to be able to serve our student athletes better. And so I offer that up as some perspective here as well.
Thank you. Ashley?
Yeah, so I would definitely piggyback off of what Darian had said. Our GM, our head coach, of course, our DFO will structure out a schedule for the whole year. But one of the main things that before I took this position, is I really had an honest conversation with the GM and head coach that it was important for them to support what I was going to be doing there. And by me saying that, I wanted them to say, this was going to be mandatory. Now, me coming to a head coach, Coach Leipold never had my position. So not only am I somewhat coming in and now educating a roster, I'm educating now a head coach, as a coaching staff, our GM. And so I think really what I needed before me moving to the Midwest is that I wanted to make sure that I was going to have the support to do that. And so we have all of our life skills workshops during the spring and summer. Our GM will ask somewhat how many workshops I'm looking for. I'll give them a number, a baseline of kind of where my outline of programs are. I take very much of approach like a strength coach. If anyone knows periodization, that the progression of programming, that's where my mind is with this. So every Tuesday, I will have 2 sessions, 8:45 and 10:15 will be our mandatory programs within our spring and summer. And that is really just consistent with that we are a morning team. We don't want our guys necessarily coming back to the building really past 1, unless they're, if they're doing extra treatment, film, anything of that nature on their own. But Coach Leipold and all of us, we really want to implement that. Football's in the morning, and then academics, your life is in the afternoon, and really give you that time. But yeah, it's always on Tuesdays, mandatory programming. And then if we have any special events, I will discuss with our GM the idea, why, I think it would be beneficial. And then of course, if Coach L has any real input that he wants us to focus on, I will of course put that within the structure of the programs too.
Awesome. Thank you. Hey, Wash.
What you want me to say, bro? Like, I mean, everything. But no, for real, everything that they said. I mean, kind of going off what JP was saying, talking with everybody is so huge. And so, I mean, I'll talk with our strength staff, I'll talk with our training staff, like, yo, what issues are you seeing? We need to make sure we get addressed. And so we'll talk with everybody, but for specific programming, coming through 2 different staffs now. With one staff, it was with the chief of staff and the head coach, and we're putting this stuff together. With my current staff, like, it's like, yo, do what you do, just make sure we still win games and don't mess nothing up. And it's like, bet. So I meet with our chief of staff, and if there's a big event, I make sure to run it up. And he's like, okay, that's cool. Like, I like that. Let's do it. But for me, the programming, since everyone's kind of talked about the scheduling, which is, I mean, huge. For me, I'll get a little bit to my method, because the process has stayed the same, even though the product has changed, right? And so love what Coach Goodman was talking about when she's saying, like, we have these mandatory on Tuesdays. We used to do something similar to that. And unfortunately, that's also changed now because of how we do stuff. And so for me, every fall is when I basically just sit in my room and throw stuff at a wall, literally and, metaphorically, and just say, okay, what are the months we got coming up, whether it is, a February, what kind of thing do we want to tie into what's already going on at large on the university, around the community. And so it's just literally thinking of what have we done before, what do we want to do, and taking that time to plan out the spring and the summer, because that's where all the big programming is. And in the fall, it's basically maintenance, right? We get a bye week, which we'll usually do some community service. I'll check in with all of our freshmen during that week to make sure they're transitioning all right through their season. But mainly the fall is actually making sure our students are good, because the athlete obviously tends to overcome when you're working with football. So that's really it. And so throughout that whole time in the fall, I'm kind of throwing up ideas and, hey, what would y'all think about this? Let's get this workshop, or maybe have this experience. I'm bringing in student athletes, like, what would y'all think? So they can just like veto it right then and there. And I'll have just different guys sitting in kind of talking about stuff like that. And I'll throw a few things over here to some of the coaches, see what they need. But that's how I typically do my program for the calendar year, is take that fall, figure out what the needs are, what we've seen, and then go from there.
Perfect. Thank you. Now we'll move to questions individually to you all. But as I ask you this question, I want you to add this question with it. So I'll do it with Darian first, and you all can see it, panelists. All right. So Darian, this was part of a non-shameless plug for the Player Development Pod. You talk about intentional development. Once again, non-shameless plug. So you have spoken about intentional development. Can you elaborate? Why is this so significant to what y'all do as a program? And also, if you would like to share kind of your foundational pillars in programming. So you're answering intentional development, elaborating on that, and the pillars of your program.
Yeah, for sure. And the pod is great. Everybody should subscribe. So there's your non-shameless plug. From having been on it and listened to it, it's an incredible show. Intentional programming. Yeah. So I kind of started talking about that phrase, and when I'm talking to, whether it's Coach Tucker or anybody I'm working with to create a program, the intentionality behind what we do with our student athletes is key. And what I've always meant by that is, I've been a student athlete. I've been a player on a team where you get a message about a team meeting and it's outside of the realm of what's already scheduled, and it's cutting into what you would consider your free time, even though as a student athlete you don't really have any free time. And it's like you get to the team room and you don't really want to be there. So I don't want to have a program or have a session or have a seminar where my players are sitting there like, I don't want to be there. And as I don't know, conceited or confident as I may be, I feel like everything that we do from a player development standpoint, all of the players that we have in the room lock in and get something out of it. And so any program that I'm having, any person I'm bringing in, or any session that we're running, there has to be intention behind it. It has to be a reason as to why we're doing it. And it has to fit in within the confines of what we call the 360-degree holistic student athlete. So every single generation of student athlete, you have to add a layer into what they are focusing on. So when I was playing, about a decade ago, obviously you have your school, you have academics, you have the athletic piece, and then we were talking about spiritual life as being important, and then we were talking about social life as actually being important, whereas the generation before me, they didn't talk about social life. Generation before that, they didn't talk about a spiritual life. And in the generation before that, it was like just football. So it's all building. And nowadays we have this personal brand piece and mental health that's included in. So that's also how I built the pillars of the program. And we have 5 that we touch on, being personal brand development, mental health and wellness, financial literacy, education, application, community service, and then career readiness. So those are the pillars of our program. And then again, through the calendar from what we just touched on in terms of how you schedule out the year, we touch on each of those pillars for about a month or two, scheduling sessions throughout the year.
Awesome. Thank you. Now, JP, same question. Or similar question, the same pillars. There we go. And then your question is, you have had a very impactful program and structure with football programs, specifically, seeing what you're doing what you did at Rice, what you're doing at Notre Dame, while serving all student athletes. How did you and how do you balance this? And then the pillars of your program.
Luckily, I'm not wrapped too tight. All the people, all the things is a hefty number of folks. And so I really want to build off things that have been said before. I pride myself on being visible and accessible. I think in the space of player development, it's really hard to be effective if you're only there in the good moments and if you're only there in the bad moments. So in the scope of how do I show up for people every day? What can I do? How am I being present? And that doesn't mean I'm physically there, but if I'm not in the same space with the team, can I send them a text message? Can I send them an email? Am I showing them love on social media? I'm not saying you have to do all of those things. That's just how I show up for my people in all the spaces that I've been. So I may be traveling with one team, but I can quickly send a note or show some love on social media to another when they have a big moment, when they are just going through it, or when they just are just being just there. I pride myself on not having those trauma bonds with people. I think in this player development space, especially for a woman in sports or a woman in a male-dominated sport, it's really easy to call us when things are wrong. When so-and-so had this family situation and they didn't know who to talk to, can they talk to you about it? Okay, I can do that and more. So when I think about the programming, when I think about the pillars for me, I think I want to build off of that purposeful or intentional mindset, and then also think about what can be mutually prosperous for all of the stakeholders involved. So when you look at our programming that's at Notre Dame right now, the one I'll focus on is our Together Irish initiative. There's 3 commitments in that space: education, engagement, and enrichment. So I like to think about education as what do we think we know and what do we need to know? How do we get that information? The engagement piece is when we have that knowledge, when we have that education, what are we doing with it? How can we actually be proximate to the communities that we say we want to serve? How do we get that knowledge? Is it tangible? Is it tactile? Am I just lecturing at people? Or speakers just coming in? Or is there more to it? So what are we doing with that? What's that engagement piece? And then enrichment for me is not only what you put into that process, but what we get out, how we chronicle that story, how we show growth, how we document what happens. And so when I know those things, when I have those commitments as a framework, we apply those to dimensions of humanity. So I know in programming standpoints, we can look at financial literacy, leadership, community service, things like that. For me, it's more so looking at various dimensions of humanity, athletic identity being one of them, but maybe more so race and ethnicity, gender, sexuality, spirituality, citizenship, and ability. Those are the kind of like how we slice things to really hone in on not only what's important for our student athletes, coaches, and staff on campus, but the impact that we can make in our community beyond that. So I don't know if anyone saw it recently, but even around our spring game with Coach Freeman, I'd set him up along the way to have him go for our day of service to a local Catholic school that was primarily Hispanic serving, needed some resources, needed some love, needed some leadership that looked like them. And he was able to have a great experience back in January. And when he had that great experience in January, he also said, how can we do more? Now, I knew that might happen. So knowing what was important to him, I was able to anticipate that and put him in a situation to thrive. I'll save you months of planning and details behind the scenes. But you can look at social media, you can look at our website and see that for our spring game, we were able to bring that entire school or invite that entire school to come to campus, have a STEM related experience, have a first game day experience for many of those kids and families, and partnered with some corporate sponsors to make that happen. And that happened within the framework of our Together Irish program. So it was purposeful, it was intentional, and it was mutually prosperous. And thinking about those commitments and the dimensions of humanity, that's how we made that happen.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Hey, y'all, look, the hardest part about being a moderator during this conference is I want to just take copious notes. TB, you began with the football team and have transitioned to all student athletes. What have you seen that works for both groups, and what do you see that does not work for both groups, and also your pillars?
Yeah, thanks. And it's so awesome to be on this panel. I know I'm taking notes too. It's crazy. Similar to JP, our framework is kind of some keywords: explore, inspire, and cultivate. But all of the elements, that Darian mentioned, like career, resume, all those things, all kind of filter in. But they also overlap in many ways too, because it helps with that exploration and identity development and discovering passions and all of those things. I would say that for me, the framework that I built with football, in many ways, football was my pilot program. And I was just able to get everything that I had kind of created that was on paper. I was able to get athletes to tap into it. What that did for me is that showed the value. And then more and more athletes wanted to tap in. So what worked for me is that using that, leveraging that, and kind of biting off one program. And that way I was able to expand from my ultimate goal when I turned Beyond Football into Beyond Sparta. I went from all football to then really primary focus was female athletes. So, although technically all 470 student athletes could tap into what I was doing at that point, I was really zeroed in on how do I provide equivalent experiences that I was giving football to our female athletes. So that was one big focus. And so I did that. The quickest way for me to do that was to launch a women empowerment series that I did throughout the whole month of September. That's when we have the least amount of female sports in season is in the fall. So even though we had still like soccer and volleyball and whatnot in season, we could get a lot of other sports to tap in. And so that was just a good time to do it. So yeah, that framework that I built was like what went well. I think the challenge is that not every coach buys in the same way that our head football coach does. I literally had a coach look me in the face and said, this is not a priority for me and I don't care and I will not do this. So you have to be able to like take that and be like, all right, cool. Well, and I always say like, shit, I would rather you be transparent and upfront with me. Like, don't say stuff. I say this to the athletes too. Like, don't tell me what you think I want to hear. Like, I'm still getting paid. I'm still going to do my job. Like, I'm cool. If you don't want to do it, at least I know where you stand. And then I would say that the second piece of that is just overall engagement from the athletes. Like I get disappointed and I shouldn't even say that. Let me take that back. Overall engagement, period. Because really what we are doing, and it goes back to what JP said about like showing up, really what we are doing is important for literally everyone in the athletics department and people across campus. So if you can get people to show up, whether it's your Black Leadership and Opportunity Center to join and tap into what's happening on our side of campus, or it's your athletics director showing up for something, or it's a head coach showing up for something, that shows buy-in, that shows support. And I think I get more disappointed when we don't have people show up that are in some of those leadership roles that literally have zero idea what my program is because they don't show up. Now, in the end, does it affect my work? No, it doesn't affect my work. They don't affect my day-to-day. But I'm also a person on a mission that I will just plop myself down in their office and I'll make sure that they know what we did. Like I ran into my athletic director at an NIL event and he didn't say anything about something that was going on. I was like, oh, hey, by the way, did you know that we have 52 people show up for the Drew Robinson mental health event? Oh, he was like, oh, wasn't that yesterday? I'm like, no, that wasn't yesterday. It was tonight. It was tonight. Just letting you know, it went really, really good. So, but yeah, and generally speaking, I'd say the buy-in component and people showing up is something that you can't get your feelings hurt. It's nothing personal. You just got to stick with what you're doing and trust and believe that the work that you are doing is impactful. And people will eventually start to show up. And one last comment about it, I think the biggest growth number for me that shows like people are showing up is that 3 years ago, we launched an internship program with Adobe. We started with 2 athletes that were interested, 2 athletes that applied, 2 athletes that got the job. Now we had 25 people apply. 16 of them got offered the job. So just in 3 years' time, that shows like the amount of growth. That's a good example of just like growth overall in my program.
Come on, growth. Love it. Thank you. JP, you know. Yeah, you created Forever Texas for the football team. Massive success. And your creation is now being used by athletic department. Hey, thanks, Kev. That's awesome. We'll leave that for another day. That happens, but can you talk about the entrepreneurial aspect of your programming and why that was so important in kicking off Forever Texas, and then also add your pillars of your program?
Yeah, for sure. Could I like take a quick aside and just like jump on the back end of what TB just said? Like you can't do this and get your feelings hurt, right? I know song I love listening to, it says hard to get better once you get your feelings involved. And like you can't do it. And so you're gonna pour out, you're gonna give everything to these guys, give all these opportunities, and then they're gonna go out there and put an article out there for everyone to see about how they didn't know what to do once they got done with their career. And you're like, bro, you walk in my office every day. You come in here and sit in here and talk with me. But there's ones that do change their lives and do remember they can call you when stuff goes sideways. So anyway, I just had to jump on that TV. So I appreciate that reminder because I was the arrogant person at one point sitting there listening, and I saw something on the headline one time, and I literally thought, if I'd have been there, like if I was the player development guy, and now I know the same thing would have happened. So I literally had to call one of my guys up and say, yo, bro, I had this thought earlier, and I apologize. I didn't realize that you don't get to touch everybody the way you want to. So anyway, sorry, so much on that. Appreciate it, TB. But for me, you're talking about like the Forever Texas program and the entrepreneurial stuff. I think that kind of goes into like the pillars that I try to utilize whenever I'm thinking through it. And so my framework is super broad. So there's just 3 areas that I try to apply one equation to for the entirety of the time. And so it's character, community, and career. How do I figure out who you are, what you're passionate about, and then what things you'd like to do to make a dent in the world? Character, community, career. And the equation that I utilize with that is a lot of our guys come in with the wrong expectations about life, right? And so the way you overcome expectations is through experience and exposure. And so how do I create experiences? How do I create exposure to the realities that they need in the area of character, in the area of community, in the area of career? And that's typically just what I'm doing because I think it is very important to have an entrepreneurial aspect. Like the things that I was doing when I got here 2 years ago, or not 2 years, when I got here 7 years ago, I'm not doing those same things anymore because the kids have changed. I mean, you got NIL, you got AEB, you got all kinds of stuff. So if I'm still doing those same things, then I'm not doing those same things. I'm getting a different job because this doesn't work. So the way that I've tried to look at it is if so imagine if there's a Chickazon, right? So if Chick-fil-A and Amazon like had a baby and it was Chickazon, like that's the kind of like, yeah, some of y'all looking like, you mean like next day delivery of Chick-fil-A? Not like that. In the sense that you get Amazon's everything and anything you want with Chick-fil-A's customer service. And you're like, oh snap, that's a little bit different. Because part of the whole entrepreneurial aspect is I'm trying to give you what you need in the package that you want. And that includes how it's being delivered. So anybody we're bringing in, just like what Darian says, it's got to connect. Like, I don't have time to sit here and like waste time for someone that I heard was good, but doesn't actually connect with our guys. But it's also like the Amazon, like we like Amazon because I get it in 6 hours if I get it, if I hit it right. But it's the timing of it, right? So it's okay, what's the timing? And so we're trying to figure out, man, what's the timing? What's the delivery piece to give you what you need in a package that you want? But I also know some of what you need because I'm taking that Chick-fil-A service aspect and asking you about that. And so when it comes to the entrepreneur, like who doesn't want to invest in themselves? The problem is that not everybody knows how. Or everybody thinks maybe the result has to look a certain way. Like, no, you don't have to go that same path. And there are other things open to you, which is where those experiences and exposure comes in. And so the entrepreneurial part is just really fun because the guys realize that we're trying to get you to do you. We're not trying to say you have to go down this path or that path or anything like it. I'm trying to get them to help. And it's funny because after they get to know me for a little bit, I'll use this phrase and they'll be like, what? I said, I need you to monetize what's in the mirror. And they're like, hold on, Kev, like, what are you saying? I'm like, I'm not saying monetize who's in the mirror because you're in the mirror for sure, but monetize what's inside of you, right? What's inside of the mirror. And so, Ed, you're a great example of that, right? So you're over here working with what's in the mirror, not just the dope edge up and, you know, the horrible passion when you played in Hightower, but the passions that you have for developing student athletes and connecting people. So you looked in a mirror and you saw, this is what I have passion for, and this is what I can do to connect people. And I want our athletes doing that. Like we got one dude trying to go work for that went and worked for like the National Wildlife and Parks because he grew out in the country. He's like, man, I love being in the country and doing all that kind of stuff. What you teaching to do for me? I said, I have no clue. Let's find out. And so we got him connected with some different people. So he gets to work with like national parks and stuff because he's like, man, it's like big city is cool, but I want to be out there doing, you know, nothing with the animals. I'm like, cool, man, that's fine. But it's really just that picture of, man, how do I monetize what's in the mirror, like what's inside of you? That's entrepreneurship. You know what I'm saying? It's the freedom of knowing, yo, I can be whoever I am, but then I'm also free to go pursue that to the max. And I think that's where that spirit comes from and why so many of our athletes, football and non, can connect with that because it's not pigeonholing anybody.
Awesome. Appreciate that. But Chickazon, everybody get your orders in Saturday because you know they're not coming on Sunday. And then to also the Kev's point, I have to say this. I don't know if you said passion or pass rush at Hightower, but hey, anything past 3rd and 5, my coach is like, get them off the field now. He was getting me off. Straight run stopper.
I was talking about that pass at Hightower, but I got you.
Okay.
Good.
I just laughed because Darian put out his like Madden, like whatever's like run stop would have been like, I gave myself like an 87. Pass rush, -12. Get him off the field right now. All right, Ashley, moving to you. You were passionate about creating a set standard of programming for the space, specifically coming from the NFL, which we'll say to another panel, but you've seen the league mandated model. If we get to a point where there are, because and we all know this, coach is going to do what they want to do. If we do get to that part where there are pillars, what would those pillars be that you would see as uniformity and programming all around? And then what are the pillars that you use right now in your program?
So to piggyback, yes, my baseline for programming was taken from the NFL on those mandated programs. However, because the space within collegiate is not so defined as much as the NFL, it's my job to really, again, educate head coach, educate our players on why maybe some of these topics that they are not interested in, sexual health, transitions that are not really maybe a highlight for them. Why does it connect with what they're trying to achieve overall? And so pillars for us is pride, relentless, and believe. And so before when I got into this program, those were the 3 pillars. So really, again, how I add value is I look at what the structure, what the culture for head coach, what he's trying to implement. And then I come tailor what my programs, what my key components would be to enhance that culture and program. So for me, again, pride, relentless, believe, but then I tailor it to being some type of topic between, if it's personal, professional, or community engagement. Again, those are the 3 pillars. And I know it sounds very basic, but within those, like, professional development, that could be mock interviews, that can be networking events, that can be resume building, that could be your 30-minute or 30-second elevator pitch. It's going to consume a multitude of financial literacy. It's going to consume multiple different topics within the major topic. So you're going to have categories underneath that major topic. And so again, I go back to my structure as a strength coach. Everything that we would look at sometimes is the low-hanging fruit. I may not do necessarily the same thing with this locker room that I may have to do with a locker room that doesn't have as many leaders. We always I implement, really speak, and a lot of us speak, that we want this player driven. We want this player led, because at the end of the day, I'm not on the field. Coaches are not on the field. You are going to have to initiate and get up on your teammates, ask sometimes to handle that. And that's not always going to have to be coming from me or from anyone else. And so what we really preach is those pillars, but then implementing that across the board within collegiate football is that we have some sort of baseline of, like, that we're not necessarily leaving it up to a head coach to say, okay, this is the only thing I want to focus on. We don't need to focus on DEI. We don't need to focus on social responsibility. We don't need to do certain things. Now, I'm not saying every coach is going to be like that, but to take that out of the realm of what the head coach is mandating someone like myself or any of us in this role, that's where, again, we can implement those mandatory topics and those mandatory sessions without maybe a head coach implementing that, sexual health is not really relevant to winning games. So let's not worry about, whether or not that's even spoken about. So that's where how I hold the pillars, and then how I kind of design the program is really based off of what I already see the program doing, what they're implementing culture-wise, and then what I see as low-hanging fruit. Your locker rooms are going to adjust. You got to adjust with your locker room. And that may be at times, if we have an event, that I have to be quick to react, just in the sense of, as a strength coach, if I know a team is coming back, they maybe have gone back super late, 2 a.m, and they're really dead. And I'm not going to have them do heavy squats right after. I know I'm not going to get what I want to get out of that session. It's very similar to how I see it here. We have a certain event. We know we had an incident, and now we had an incident, and it was dealing with conflict in a bar. We all understand these are kids, so if I know that there's an incident that happened, I got to be quick to say, okay, I know I had this program in place for that Tuesday, but now I got to adjust and go what now the need is. I need to now hit that conflict resolution and how we are handling ourselves, maybe in the public or whatnot. You've got to be at least able to adjust what your team is needing at that point. It's not going to be so cookie cutter.
Thank you. Now we're going to move to questions. This has been a great panel. We have a lot of questions. So before we go to questions, we're going to do one word. Is it one word association? Is that what it's called correctly? One word association, one word. Okay, so you're going to give me one word of encouragement for those looking to get in this space. I'm going to give you 5 seconds to think about your one word. I know. Okay, 2 words. Okay, 1 sentence. You got 15 seconds. 15 seconds to give encouragement. All right, and it's open. Whoever's ready, take the 15 seconds. Shoot the shot. Shoot it. Shoot the J.
I'll go ahead and start. Mine would be aggressive. Patiently aggressive is how I've heard it put to me. Oftentimes you actually see in these spaces, especially in athletic spaces, staff members are afraid to go to a head coach or afraid to go to an athletic director, but people in our roles just barge right in and say, "Hey, coach, this is what we're going to do." And I actually like that aggressiveness. So you can't be afraid to go in and let whoever's running the show know how it's got to be or how it should be. And usually you get a good response.
Thank you. Who's up? Who else? Who's shooting the shot?
I had some wisdom. I don't know if this is shot here, but I'm sticking with alliteration. Those of you who know me know I love alliteration. So mine is align your aspirations and leverage the power of and. I think a lot of times there's the competing interests. Coach wants this, I want this, campus partners want this, but I need this. Align the aspirations and instead of making it an either or, it's a both and. Figure out how to make that happen, figure out how to make things effective. And I know you'll be great when you do that.
Awesome.
I would say trust your gut as you go through programming. Just if things don't feel right or it doesn't feel like a good fit, or if you're feeling some type of way about a relationship, there probably is something there. Trust your gut and then address it and try to work through it.
I would say be purpose-driven and be consistent and persistent with what you are trying to get across and how you're going about trying to get into this industry.
Awesome. Thank you. And Kev,
I would say don't do this job because you want to, do it because you have to. Like, you have to make a change in people's lives, because if you do it for that reason, regardless of the ups and downs, you'll be fulfilled in your own.
Awesome. Thank you.